Psych.
Good show.
This is the episode now. Welcome.
Hello.
I hate you.
Hi.
Welcome to the episode of the podcast with the movie people
That's us.
from
The movie
Sydney,
people.
Australia.
People of movies.
Whoa, don't narrow it down too much, buddy.
They could find us.
47th biggest movie podcast in our 3-kilometer radius.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I don't. What are we talking about today? I don't even fucking know.
We were just having like a very somber conversation. So I feel like we need to like up the ante, like lift up the energy a little bit.
All right. Well, let's talk about something exciting then. I think we finally got our shit together. We had a real good little game plan before this.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
We're at week 0.
Everything we
Let's not
talked about now, so we're fully accountable. We're going to list out here to our audience. So
let's not like cheer ourselves before
Yeah.
we've actually done
No,
anything.
that's the way to.
No, look,
It always works. Watch a film, you Philistine.
Yeah.
It always comes true.
It's been a weird year, and I think that the consistency that we had built up before COVID hit has fairly obviously waned. We've tried to keep it up with Movie Book Club, which has in itself been really interesting. But I think that we just need to kind of hunker down and maintain the constants with which we're putting out material, just because it's been, as I said, it's been a weird year. I think that's going to be everyone's excuse for anything that happens in 2020.
2020 is a write-off. Nobody's going to pay it. This year will be taken out of the history books, I swear to
Just
God.
a blip, right?
Everyone-
I mean, it could be. It was interesting. I was watching this news anchor who said that in '68, he said it felt very similar. It felt like the end of the world in a lot of ways. And he was like, there was no, hello, kitty. There was,
You're gonna get sued.
It felt as though there was no hope, that this was the end of the world, all that kind of stuff. And he goes, and then you just kind of move on and people kind of think about it as like just a date in a
milestone.
history book,
Yeah.
right? The Spanish flu is just a date in a history book.
Who even knew conceptually anything like Spanish flu? It's just like
It wasn't in the. It wasn't
now
in
we
the,
tangibly know.
I just thought it was a flu that was doing like a saucy little dance.
Yeah. So I reckon that like people.
Why didn't we couldn't we have gotten a better name than COVID?
Well, it's just what it's called.
like the
well, according to Trump, it's the China virus. That's,
yeah.
that's
There you
fun.
go. Be careful what you wish for, George.
China virus.
China.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, why don't we talk?
The podcast is completely reformed now and forever. Hollywood just needs to start releasing some movies as well.
Wouldn't that be
and making
fantastic?
Some movies. Then our movie podcast can really thrive.
Although we did get some interesting news this week. I mean, it's sort of more of the same, but it is somewhat interesting. So
Kind of more following up on stories we've had before.
Yeah.
But before that,
Just quickly.
yes.
before that,
Yeah,
I
that was a
already
good-
said
that-
before
that was a
that.
great
Precursor to
segue
the
for you to jump in.
Stop fucking gaslighting me.
Fuck. Oh yeah. Just the general theme around Movie Book Club this month that I don't think we really emphasized in the last episode was it's Halloween and October, blah blah blah. So we're doing 2 horror movies every week. And Benny, you chose this week. We're going to talk about it later. Let's talk about what we've been watching now.
It's your pick this week, right?
Yeah, it's my pick.
Good, because I had
And
not
I've
thought
still
about
got
that.
to pick. I've still got to pick one of them.
Oh, I love that. I love
That's
the last
okay.
minute
Fucking
decisions.
roulette.
Does that mean that I'll actually get
Roulette of
I'll
death.
actually get
I'm actually
Halloween
going to
in
start
my-
researching that now.
my
No pressure.
yeah? It'll just be Halloween.
You just do Halloween and another Halloween. Halloween and Rob Zombie's Halloween. All right, well, since you guys are just sitting there staring at space, I will jump off with what I've been watching this week.
Hell yeah.
Mhm.
First of all, I watched a wonderful little sci-fi movie from Russia. Maybe you've heard of it. Not the movie. You haven't heard of the movie, just the country. Called Sputnik. This movie is probably actually not technically released yet. I think I saw it through an encore kind of screening from the Fantastic Film Festival Australia,
Cool.
which I mentioned a lot earlier in the year. Basically, it is right in that Alien vein. Like it's a complete
Ship.
No,
thing.
so it's set on Earth, but it is about a creature that kind of gestates within a human cosmonaut who has returned from space. And
And
It-
how was it?
it was fantastic. It takes that
Okay.
premise and unfolds in some very, very interesting ways.
Okay.
And like Alien, the original movie itself, has just a lot of subtextual stuff going on beneath it, and a lot of just interesting ideas that sometimes these monster movies don't really fuck with. And it was polished as hell.
Okay.
Where did you watch this on?
This was in a cinema. This was it was a kind of a one-off screening, but
Nice.
I think it might be available somewhere now. But
Cool.
yeah, very enjoyable, very cool, very polished. I always feel bad when I watch a foreign film of this quality and be like, "Fuck, I'm probably missing out on so many movies by
Yeah.
not doing this more often." But that was great, and I also
Just
am.
before you move on to the next thing, I just wanted to point out how cool it is what Netflix is doing right now, which is promoting international projects on its main platform to just about everyone. And I mean, one of the things that I found so cool is that there's a trailer out now for a German show called Barbarians, which looks hectic. Like it looks really well produced. It's 100% something I would watch. It's right in my niche. It's history, it's Roman, all that kind of shit. And the only other thing is it just happens to be in German, and that would, for so many people, just immediately exclude it from ever being marketed to you, for it ever being in your peripheral view in any way. But
As long as they give you the option for subtitles versus dub, because
some of it is dubbed like naturally. It comes.
some
on
of my
that way.
colleagues got me onto this Indian show that everyone's going nuts for in Netflix India, and I went to watch it, and it was all dub, and it was awful.
It's hard.
It was
It's hard.
really
really?
bad,
Yeah.
really, really bad. And I was like, why can't you give me that option?
You had no option.
Like, give me the option as the viewer. You
That's
let
bizarre.
people fucking go at 1.5x. Can you not give me the original language in which this piece was presented?
I would have thought it would have been the
Fuck.
other way around, where you'd find everything with subs, and then some would have the option to be dubbed. That seems like a very bizarre.
Well, I
way to
mean,
go
that's
about
what
it.
Anime Lab is, right? It's the subbed version as the base tier, and if you want the dub version, that's the premium tier where
Yeah.
you have to cough up an extra few bucks.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they decide, because I do love that they promote this stuff. Because I remember the first time I saw Dark, the series on
Oh,
Netflix.
yeah.
It's meant to be like kind of Stranger Things esque time travel or something. The preview was sort of playing on the screen in English, and I wasn't paying close enough attention to realize that it was a dub. And I was like, "Oh, this looks really interesting." And then my own lack of commitment was like, "Oh, I don't feel like watching something subtitled right now." But it was like default English dub, which is a bit odd. But they don't seem to do that all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, so I just think it just kind of flashing, because I watched the Barbarians trailer today, and I also finished up, I think it was last month, the Secret of the Nile series, which is like a 30 part series in Egyptian Arabic, which I would have just never had access to that.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, speaking of Netflix series in languages, I am
Whoa.
I'm so good at segues.
Fuck.
I am halfway through The Haunting of Bly Manor, which I suspect somebody here has watched some of, maybe.
I
I nearly-
wish, but I
Nearly.
think let's dial in a review for
Yeah.
next week.
Cool.
Yeah, I basically, my fiance doesn't like horror films, so every time the trailer came up, and I was so excited when I saw it come up, I was like, "Sweet." She's like, "You will turn that thing off right now." I was like, "All right, cool." I'm gonna stay with. I'm staying with my parents for a week or so. I was there, and I started switching it on the TV, and my mom looked at me and goes, "If you'd like to die, sure." I was like, "Right, switching it back."
Yeah. No
So
judgment
I'm
at all.
kind of like my only other option is to watch it alone, which is what I did with Haunting of
Hill House.
Hill House, and which I mean is fine, but I prefer to watch horror films with other people. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. So
Well, to allay your fears somewhat, it is, I wouldn't say even a tenth as scary as the first season.
Okay.
It is such a slow burn gothic horror that in many ways feels like it could have been like an old black and white 50s movie or something.
Okay.
Those really slow contemplative ones. I am at the point now where I'm really into it and really loving it. I've just finished the 5th episode, which very much like season 1 is kind of a landmark episode
It
that
sort of contextualizes
changes
things.
how things go. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, very cool. I'm loving all the returning cast members from season 1, all the new
Okay.
cast members. Henry Thomas, the little boy from E.T., who was the younger version of the father from season 1, I think, as a not expert, does a very convincing British accent. But I'm just so happy to see him in anything, and I'll probably praise him no matter what he's doing.
So the
I
general
really
vibe
liked him in
I'm-
the first one.
the general vibe I'm getting from you is like you're not sort of run out of this is Haunting of Hill House V2. This is like a bit more of a moody, slower, like you're still waiting for it to come
feels
together.
very different to me.
That's
Which
good.
I
I
think
like
is
that.
great.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very happy about that because the house it's set in, the fact that it's called The Haunting of X, could be very formulaic.
And it's Flanagan.
It's Flanagan. It looks like the same house to me, honestly. I think it might be some of the same sets, but yeah, it really feels like a different thing, which I really appreciate. Also, the actor who played the adult version of Luke in season 1, he was in The Invisible Man as well as the Invisible Man. He's in this too. I love that guy, and he has this amazing Scottish accent in this season. He is an English actor. He sounds exactly like Mark Strong in Kingsman. I'm like, fuck, man, you were like cool and sexy before, but now you're just at some other level. He's so good. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm really keen to see where it goes.
Did it take a couple episodes for it to form? Like, were you kind of a little bit like,
Yeah, because it's very character based and very deliberately paced.
Which
so
is
you
what
really
I loved
have
about
to,
the first one.
exactly.
As well.
But
good to know that going in.
But the first one was so focused on here's this episode about this character and their backstory. This one's not doing that as much, but though it is a little.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to get used to the ensemble as it builds. But yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot so far. Hopefully
Cool,
it
cool.
sticks the landing because this first season did not, in a lot of people's eyes, not mine. I loved it, but yeah, enjoying. And I'm also about halfway through season 2 of The Boys. I finally caved because so many people are talking about that, and I just keep hearing about the shocking twists and The Boys has gone too far, and I'm like, I hate watch season
And?
1. I'm gonna have to hate watch season 2 as well.
And
It's a very watchable show. It's well made. It's fantastically acted. It feels so regressive in a lot of ways to me, and so backwards. But as you know, I'm a fucking hippie fairy, so I don't know. People enjoy it.
Regressive in ways that like
Regressive in ways as the main character strikes me as a really like 90s kind of like nice guy who's winning over the girl by just being a friendly dude who's like always right about
I
everything.
see you've
I'm like-
seen my moves.
Yeah, which is a trope that has worked for a while in the past, but I feel like once you get like 500 Days of Summer, like you can't go back to what that movie completely eroded. So, and this is a TV show where you'll have like a terrorist scene on a plane, and it's like straight up like a Saudi looking dude shouting like Arabic. I'm like, man, I thought we got through this in the 2000s. Not that I'm saying you can't do that, but it just feels so obvious and lazy, and it really speaks to the fact that I
Villain
think
of the day, right? It used to be Russians or Germans.
it just feels boring, but I have more issues like the fact that just the every single hero in this world is so obnoxiously evil and horrible and unlikable. It's hard to imagine how this world actually functions supporting them, but that's probably part of the point because I think they're more based on like pro athletes than anything else, and I'm not a sports fan, so I could talk for days about how much I hate a lot of pro athletes, but yeah, like I said, it's watchable, and I would like to hear what you think of it, Connor, because I think you might get something out of it.
Yeah, I still haven't watched season 1.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of there's so many TV shows that I want to get onto, and I just haven't had the time. Well, are you finished your picks?
That's it.
Which will lead me into the fact that I don't think I've watched anything apart from our movie book club movies. But I have been reading.
Nice.
And it's
Nerd.
Yeah, and there is a movie version of it, so
Okay,
you
that's
can
all
check
right
that out.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I was about to fucking.
So the book is called "Touching the Void," Into the Void. God, now I can't even remember.
Touching the into.
Yeah.
touching me.
Touching
So
you.
it's about two
Holding
mountaineers.
me.
It's a true story, right? It's about two mountaineers that go into Peru to conquer this at that time unconquered or unsummited mountain.
Is that Machu Picchu?
It is not.
Oh.
Is that the only?
That's the only mountain in Peru I know.
Is it
not-
Mount Everest?
It's not a mountain, but also okay.
Is it Machu Picchu? Oh, Machu Picchu is a trail,
I believe it's
not a mountain.
Well, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Machu Picchu is the site, like
Right.
the
Okay,
settlement.
that would make
I
sense.
might
Get
be
to the
wrong. It
bottom of
might
this,
actually be
goddammit.
a mountain.
Let's
I take
have
that
a
back.
fucking look.
Take that back.
Why don't you
If
talk?
it is,
George,
I'm
you
gonna
look.
You look it
fucking-
up. You look it
I'm
up.
gonna
Yeah,
kill you.
I
I'm
will.
on live
I
on the
will
podcast.
stand
I'm
down
gonna get a knife.
if I was wrong.
Ah! Die!
It was in the news today because they let one tourist in a day or some shit like I did. It was
Yikes.
headline reading.
How do you spell Machu Picchu?
Pichu, like the
MACHU.
Pokemon.
Just Google, just help
All right,
me.
you Google silently. Anyways, it's about these two mountaineers and basically about them going up, and then on the way down from this mountain, there's an accident, and one of the mountaineers breaks their leg.
Yeah.
And it is.
It's a little bit rote, isn't it?
Oh,
You know.
oh yeah,
Real
yeah.
life.
Sorry, the true story of what happened like 20 years ago,
A
whenever
little
it
bit
was.
formulaic.
Yeah.
You know, hiker
Look-
breaks his leg.
Oh,
Come
they
on.
both survived?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing is, it's not the plot that interests you at all. In fact, it's kind of hard to follow because there's a lot of like colloquialisms. There's a lot of like little like just mountaineering terms that I had to go look up, and I was like, trying to visualize because it's all a lot of like, oh, we climbed up this particular type of a section on a mountain, and I'm like, oh fuck, this is really difficult for me to kind of visualize in my head. But the way that this guy writes his experience, and you kind of know what happens because it's the guy that breaks his leg that's writing the book. But the way that he writes it and his kind of commentary on coming to terms with death and the decisions that you have to make on the mountain, like it's one of the most impressively written books I've read in a very long time. And like I just find it endlessly fascinating and gripping. Like there's every so once in a while a book will get me like stressed, and this one definitely does that. I'm interested to check out the movie. It's like 2004. It's gotten generally good reviews.
Generally good reviews in 2004 means a pretty shit movie nowadays, I'd
Well, and that's kind of what I
On
thought
the
as
Benjamin
well.
Smith radiometer.
And look, you probably wouldn't be. It looks
Adjusted for inflation.
It looks relatively low budget, and I think they might have spliced in a little bit of a documentary aspect to it.
All right.
So, I mean, 2004 for me is not a year that I generally associate with great films,
How
or like
dare you.
early 2000s.
Fucking dare you.
Early
George
2000s.
Zero.
That's the Departed, my friend.
Oh, look, yeah. Pick a year. There's a good movie that came out, but just
Begins.
that style of like action
Spider-Man
film
2. No, actually.
that
Wait?
I don't know, man. Stop naming movies.
Yeah, Spider-Man 2.
Anyways, I want to check out the film. If anyone's interested in books, I highly recommend this book. It's not a long read. It is a little bit jargony, but it's the story or just the way that it's written. Is fucking fascinating.
And just to finish this
Is
little
Machu Picchu a
mountaineering
mountain?
segment of the podcast, Machu Picchu is a 15th century Inca citadel
Oh, it is. Oh,
located
so I was right.
in the eastern something.
God, I was worried about that.
Listen.
I hate not being right.
The important part of it is it says it's on a mountain ridge.
Didn't George say it was a trail and you sort of agreed with him?
Well, because it's the site, right? So there's a trail that's part of the site, but
Well, that said it's the Citadel.
George said it was a mountain.
To the citadel.
Just since you brought it up, I have also been reading a book this week, which is
An
very
actual book?
unlikely.
Really?
Or like
Me
a-
too.
No, not a comic book. I'm over that. I've grown up now. As of 2 weeks ago. No, because I read a collection of short stories the other week,
Nice.
from which one of
Oh, yeah.
was adapted into the movie Wounds, which I
Yep.
love. And I've actually enjoyed reading so much, and I feel like such a fucking troglodyte for being like, hey, have you heard of books? It's like a movie in your head.
Yeah.
But I started reading Robert A. Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. He's the writer of Starship Troopers. Someone gifted me this book like 5 years ago, and I'm like, I will get around to that before I die. and I've only got like 3 years left, so I had to
Yeah.
get on this thing.
Glad you
bell.
made that joke before I did.
I will report back next week when I've read some more, but I am fucking adoring it. Like, I am laughing out loud at a book, which is something I have ignored books so much in my adult
In
life.
a
I feel so
monologue
bad.
that you can do in a book is very, very interesting.
It's- I
just
mean-
very, very clunky in movie format.
It's a completely different medium. And I mean, there's a reason that people usually say, "Oh, the book was better," right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Your
I mean-
imagination is limitless.
yeah, and it's there's some movies that you couldn't make me read the novelization of because they're very specific to like I mean, I think that at least one of the movies that we've watched for book club, I probably wouldn't. You couldn't pay me to watch or read the novelization of it because it just wouldn't be anything to it because it's such a visual movie. Whereas, other movies where they kind of go the other way, you're like, ugh, this is like, you've just added unnecessary visualization onto this.
What was I gonna say though?
You were reading a book.
Were you going to
That
pass
was
it on
just
to me?
that was it.
No, what I find I'm really doing, and I wonder if you do this often, Connor, because you read a lot more than me. And just like how you said, the movie's never as good as the book. I find that I'm, as a real movie guy, I'm reading this book and I'm so interested to see a movie version. I would like
Oh,
be
all
so
the
interested.
time.
And I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah,
casting everyone in it.
Yeah.
Like Timothy Chalamet is the
Yeah.
stranger in
Yeah,
a
yeah,
strange
yeah.
land.
This bit, how do you do that bit?
Yeah, like I know
Oh.
I know he's in June, but I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck, why'd they get him in June? He'd be so good for this.
I
And you splice,
100%
take,
agree.
you maybe remove that bit, we keep that bit.
I
That's how
always
I
do it.
always look at it.
I always do it. Particularly with like historic epics as well, like historical fiction. I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool to like have a visualization of some of these battles or some of this? Like, I always think that would be really cool. And in my head, it's kind of that perfect, like they'd lift the script off the page and the movie would be 4 hours and it would have this casting and, this, that, or the other thing. And then, all the things that would be completely unrealistic for a real film.
Yeah. I mean, this book is so esoteric and so full of unknowable things and people's inner thoughts. I'm like, I don't know how they could really do this justice, but
then you
I'd
have
be
something
so
like
keen to say.
Then you have something like a Scanner Darkly, which you'd think would be a very difficult thing to put, from the page onto the
Presumably
screen.
it was.
Well, yeah, it did end up being, but that was a movie that we all loved. So yeah, I think that's
And we all said as much on the episode of the podcast
yeah.
that you can check out yourselves.
Yeah. Disappeared. Zap.
that was really that was one of
See ya.
my
One of your favorite moments on the podcast?
it was one of the
The treasured moments.
no, I really enjoyed that movie and I enjoyed talking about that movie with you guys. So yeah, George, what have you watched?
I'm still going with Tokyo Ghoul, working my way through that, loving that. It's very, very brutal. Great character development. How characters in anime seem to do something that they don't do. Like they often swap or they go from bad to good or something really cool happens. So there's a lot of fun stuff happening with that. So enjoying that a lot. I also, my favorite podcast that I like to bring up, the King Cast. I actually this week went ahead and watched the film that they discussed, which was Creepshow. So this is 1982 film that Stephen King wrote and George A. Romero directed, and it's 5 little short horror anthologies. Listen, these are schlocky. This is not really that well done, but it's a fun little artifact. And yeah, you can get a lot out of it from that perspective. I would never recommend this. I would recommend this to a Stephen King fan. Or
Do you know who is recommending it? Shudder. Heavily.
Really?
Yeah.
Creepshow.
Oh, that's the new
one.
They've
Oh, is that
done,
the
they've
new
done
one?
a new series.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Kind of based on that.
Because I
anthology
just
series.
signed up
on
it.
It's spun out a couple of different series over the years.
Gotcha. All right, interesting.
And then I'm also, similarly to you guys, started reading The Dark Tower.
Wow.
The
Oh,
Gunslinger.
that's a. All
Damn
right,
it.
so the first one, right?
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
gonna give you that anthology book last week and I forgot it. Now you'll never get to it if you
No,
started
it's
the Dark
over.
Tower series.
Well, no,
It's
yeah, he
over.
will because he might get through the first book, and I almost guarantee you'll stop either there or maybe the second one.
Ooh.
It's because the first one he published out of short stories in a series of like what those sort of weird fiction magazines back in the day, So it's a cobbled together, more of like a single piece. And then definitely the second book is where it really gets very heavy on the lore and the characters. And
Which is, I mean, it's cool.
have
So,
you read
like,
it?
I've read the first 2.
And
I thought they were really interesting, but I found myself.
it's quite esoteric, isn't it?
The first one is.
It's hard to.
The second one picks up in pace and like has more of a
Oh, really?
actual
Okay.
plot and like devices and things
Hmm.
like that. The first one is very, like, as you said, it's very esoteric. It's very kind of like the wandering man type style.
But I think each one is in of itself very different from the next. And
Yeah.
I think that this would be I mean, the Stand trailer came out this week. That's a fucking hard one to adapt, and same with this one. Same with It. They're always hard to adapt.
Yeah,
these
I don't
sprawling
know what
epics.
they were thinking when they tried to do the dark. Well, I know what they were thinking, but like,
You know what's so interesting about that King cast, and I'm sorry if I'm always plugging it, but that Dark Tower, that story.
rue the day
about
you
that
ever
dude-
mentioned that podcast, Ben.
That dude, I'm getting so much value out of it. I
Sorry,
really
boys.
love it. But this guy who went to prison for 20 years, falsely accused Damien Nickel, part of the I can't remember the name of the
Very high profile murder case.
the Memphis something
Murders.
case. Yeah, the Memphis murders. Let's just settle
The
on that.
Memphis crimes.
This guy was in solitary confinement for 50% of his time in 20 years. And he said, he's just talking on this podcast about how he read The Dark Tower and these characters. Well, he was so invested in these characters, it was like his lifeline.
Mm.
And when they get killed off, certain characters get killed off later, it's like he was fucked up, dude. Like it was like losing a friend. And I
That
was
was
like,
me watching
wow.
Lost.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just the power of storytelling, the power of magic. I know that sounds
this
really
episode is titled "Have you heard
Yeah.
of books?"
yeah. the printing press.
I think they're onto something with it.
Yeah, fuck. The alphabet
What
consists of
what is the
26
pandemic?
characters.
What has the pandemic done to you two? Like,
Oh, it's just so many bad things.
Funny thing
Forced
is,
to
I
read
can
books.
only read when I'm out of the house. I only do it at the beach.
oh, beach is the best time to.
Oh, totally. But quarantine never got me reading at all.
I find that actually the bus is where I most love reading because it's that time where you would normally not be doing anything.
Mm.
So I used to power through books when I was
Mate, I'm busy
You
on
can't
the
do
bus.
that
I
on
have
the
so much
motorbike.
Sudoku to play. Are you kidding me?
Is that your new Tetris?
No, Tetris is at home. Sudoku's for out of the house.
Sudoku, please don't bring that up on my podcast.
What's wrong with Sudoku?
Sudoku.
Sudoku. whatever.
Sudoku.
Fuck. You know what I'm
All
talking
right,
about.
let's get into the next part.
All right.
The news? The
Whatever.
news.
Sure. As you
The
can
new
see, we've really got
adaptation
the
of
podcast
Sudoku
on
is hitting
lockdown.
cinemas in.
Yes. Okay. So following up from last week, where we heard that bizarrely, Jamie Foxx would be in some fashion reprising his role as Electro in the MCU's Spider-Man 3. Now we know that Doctor Strange will be joining them, which if you guys had, I mean, we didn't. We were all sure this would be some kind of multiverse story, but if anyone had any doubts about that, this pretty much locks that in, I'm sure.
I mean, it technically doesn't because it's still an MCU
All right, Connor.
movie. Oh, no, I was trying to, like, unless I'm missing something. But unless I'm missing something, having Doctor Strange in a Spider-Man movie wouldn't be that bizarre because they had Iron Man in a
No, totally. But just in terms of what they're doing with Doctor Strange in this phase of the MCU, it seems like, Doctor Strange in
Is
the
that
multiverse
conduit?
It better be
of
fucking
madness.
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
It better be
Gotcha.
fucking good. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, they're
Because
taking a big swing here.
I'm expecting something from Doctor Strange because he
I'm-
has
I'm-
not delivered.
Oh,
Whoa,
he
that's
did in Infinity
interesting.
War. He was
He
great in
did,
Infinity War.
but what did he do in Endgame?
What did anyone do in Endgame? Fuck
Yeah,
that movie.
he was dead for 90%.
Controversial
What do you like?
opinion.
Are you resting that on his shoulders?
Fuck you, Doctor
Like,
Strange.
what?
I literally, do you know what? I literally just threw that statement out there, not remembering what happened to Doctor Strange, and just wait for
I
it.
wish that was
he
in the
did
movie.
fucking
Literally,
nothing
that
in
is
that
the
movie.
internet, isn't it? Just
I wish-
throw something out there with no foundation.
I wish that was in the movie. He came back, and the Avengers are like, "Where you been, bro?"
Yeah,
It's like,
you've done fucking nothing.
I've been dead for 5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, I was really, I'm not feeling Benedict Cumberbatch in that movie. He like barely showed up.
He had COVID for the whole.
Fuck.
So,
I'm pretty sure I mentioned this last week, but if this is the route that they're going, I like that they're taking a punt because I don't think that them doing the same thing would necessarily cut it. I think that they really need to expand. I think they need
Exactly,
to,
and doing a multiverse involving Spider-Man is really original.
I mean, of the scale and like, I mean, we can
For the
find.
mass
I know,
audience,
I know,
for
I
the
know.
mass audience, it is, I reckon.
Fuck, that's so sad that didn't do better. Spider-Verse, but
Spider-Verse did well, didn't it?
it did fine. It did
Yeah.
alright.
Like, it did well.
It did not do well for a movie that is both animated and Spider-Man. Animated movies and Spider-Man movies crack $1 billion all the time. Not this one.
What was this, 600 or something?
Made $17 at the box office.
What was the last
I'm
animated
surprised they're making a
Spider-Man
second
film?
one.
Spider-Verse. What?
No. Before that.
There wasn't one.
Okay. Oh, sorry. You said that like animated and Spider-Man always crack $1 billion.
No, I said animated movies.
Yeah.
From the big like animated children's films
Oh,
always
I
crack
see
$1
what you're
billion,
saying,
and
yeah.
Spider-Man movies always crack $1 billion.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there was a
I was
comma.
like, I was trying to rack my brain. I was like, "There's no way
There
that
was
I'm
a
that
semicolon.
far out of the loop that I'm just." I was like,
Did you not
I've
hear that
never
in my
heard.
I mean,
voice?
have you seen Amazing Spider-Man
Yeah.
2? That was pretty good animated. Anyway, I think when we talked about Spider-Man kind of getting kicked out of the MCU, and that was a thing they were sort of tossing about, and it looked like Sony might have to keep making this franchise without the help of Tony Stark and all this stuff. As MCU franchises go, I'm like, that is one that can really stand on its own. And I think that'd be okay. I'm of course hoping that what they're doing here works out, but I don't love the idea of them always making Peter have this like sidekick or be a sidekick to another MCU character. Like Spider-Man is pretty much the strongest brand that Marvel has, except for maybe like Iron Man now. And it seems weird that they keep kind of throwing
the
him behind
happy-go-lucky
these other
kid.
characters.
But that brand
In
is
this one.
based off the fact that he's a kid, he's a teenager. It was that new
Absolutely,
kind of.
but in the comics, his thing is he's on his own. He always has to fend
Yeah.
for himself. He's not one of
Yeah.
the Avengers necessarily. He has to solve his
But
own
isn't
problems,
that-
and his life fucking sucks.
But isn't that a consequence or like just the facts of the matter that at the MCU? Like,
Yeah.
you can't get everything right for that character. If you can't get everything right for all these characters in this shared universe, like there's compromises that have to be made.
But very simply speaking, Spider-Man 3 in this continuity doesn't have to be we're bringing in Doctor Strange and all the other Spider-Men.
Can I tell you?
You can.
I actually really fucking yawn at this multiverse thing.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Really?
Well, considering
just on paper, like that's not enough for me. Like you got to fucking blow me away because, to be honest, what was the last one? It was Homecoming and then
Far From Home.
Far From Home. Far From Home it was very lackluster in my opinion. Very, very lackluster.
Whoa.
Oh, all
So
Not
you're
mine.
going to have to. So from a franchise that seems to be heading in more of a young adult fashion, from Homecoming, which seems more like a typical MCU film, with Far From Home seem more of like hitting that teeny market, which I don't care about. That's fine. But then to compound that even further, if I'm right in saying it's going further in that direction, adding in the multiverse aspect as well. Like, I'm just not sure if this is right now on paper. This is not saying to me anything other than let's see. But none of this is really. I think a lot of people are getting a lot of, oh, what could this mean? What could that mean? For me, like right now, with actually last week when we were talking about it, I was a lot more keen on it. To hear Doctor Strange coming in, maybe I've got a bit of the sentiment that you're bringing forward, Benny. It was a bit more of a like a. Yeah, so what? Didn't he turn up in Thor, or didn't Thor turn up in Doctor Strange or some bullshit? Like,
Yeah, so that's
who gives
kind
two
of
fucks?
that the news itself doesn't really kind of shock me, but it does lean it more towards it being a multiverse. And I mean, from my perspective, what more do you really want from them? I mean, like it's
not to tie into the Amazing Spider-Man
It's just like,
movies.
put it
but I
this
mean,
way. Put it this
I
way.
kind of love that because it does and it doesn't, right? It maintains the purity. It's
Here's
it's
the thing,
basically
here's
a
the
way
thing,
for
here's-
Marvel to have their cake and eat it too.
Here's
which
the
I think is
biggest
clever.
problem. Here's the biggest problem. Is on paper, time travel in MCU. Holy fuck. When we saw that behind the scenes shit, those photos, like my mind was racing. And then to get the convoluted mechanics they actually brought forward, they didn't give two fucks. So like, will the multiverse, that's what I'm worried about,
All right,
is
do you
will the
know what?
multiverse actually work mechanically, satisfactorily,
So-
will it?
I recently rewatched Endgame. I don't think I talked about it in the.
You did not.
But I mean, that's
Shameful.
yeah, fuck. I mean, what am I going to say? I watched it again.
Well, you're bringing something up now.
I am bringing it up now
So far.
Bringing up
specifically
bullshit.
to what you were saying, which is that the time travel, which a lot of people, including us, spent a lot of time analyzing and looking at the mechanics of and doing this, that, or the other thing, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, I rewatched it, and it's just not that big of a deal. In fact, it made more sense this time, if I'm honest, as well. Like, I think the mechanics actually do generally work out. But, I mean, beyond that, it's not that important. And they don't really... I mean, it's kind of inconsequential to the overall story and what they're trying to achieve.
And that's just that's just kind of the value I put on different things within a story. Like if you're bringing in time travel and it doesn't matter and you have Tony Stark crack it in a day, then I'm like, okay, I kind of prefer when Tenet does something that's super interesting and engaging intellectually. But this is not an argument we need to get into again.
Yeah. I mean, for the purposes of doing what they needed to do,
don't open Pandora's box of time travel.
But I mean, I think it's fine that they did because
they didn't satisfy me on time travel. So this is all I'm saying. This is all I'm saying. I'm not saying they're going to fuck up the multiverse. All I'm saying is the past most relatable thing to this was the Endgame time travel, and I personally, as a viewer, as a fan of time traveling films, felt underwhelmed, and I thought that the level of experimentation that probably could have occurred was not fully explored. And that's why I'm worried that the multiverse is just going to be like, is it going to be fully explored?
Hey, it's Andrew Garfield. And I'm in an especially vulnerable position here because I have been doing so much actual comic book reading lately because I'm a nerd. And I've been doing a kind of a deep dive into a lot of the DC stuff from the past few years that is doing, in my opinion, just such amazing, interesting work with the multiverse, in particular Grant Morrison's Multiversity. And it's something that doesn't do what that was aiming for, which I don't know if they would necessarily bother. It's like,
especially
really
in that
hard to
form,
do.
right?
It's so meta and so interesting.
MCU has what per phase 10 or even less films, so they have to like tell an arc or kind of encapsulate an idea of like the multiverse in those kind of films. Whereas comic books, you can have entire runs in single universes and then like mix it. It's just not the form that you're not going to get the best version of the multiverse. I can tell you that now. Like save yourself any
multiverse
kind of
definitely works better in comic book or
But what I do
written
like
word format
is that comparatively, the MCU has been it has been slowly expanding. And I think this is the next stage of that. It's not going to be revolutionary, but I don't need it to be. I just need it to expand the way it's been expanding for the last 10 years, which is it started out with these kind of single piece Iron Man, Thor, all that kind of like, Captain America, and progressively introduced, this kind of interconnected web of characters and supplementary characters in different settings and space and, teams and grand villains across big
Iron
arcs.
Fist.
And then
one challenge they have though.
Yeah.
One challenge they have though is being out of the zeitgeist for this long. Like I think, Black Widow, when it eventually comes out, is it going to be a bit of a
Yeah. Oh,
Probably would have been anyway.
I could have told you that.
But they haven't released a film in what, a year now?
It's the longest break they've had since like
So yeah,
Iron Man 2.
Ant-Man versus the Wasp comes out, but there's so much. Just the snowball is that big, the momentum's going that hey, we blip a little bit, we'll get you know what I mean? It's still going.
Yeah.
The snowball is not as big right now, and if Black Widow isn't as strong, if this isn't as strong, if that isn't as strong, DC very quickly is in a much better position than Marvel.
I mean, they're in the same COVID-ridden world
Yeah,
that Marvel's in, so not that great of a position.
Just I'm talking about in 5 years sort of time frame.
Oh, I mean, anything could happen in 5 years.
Anything can happen, but
I mean,
It's such a helpful argument,
but
Connor.
I mean,
aliens could come down and fucking destroy
I
the
mean,
world.
like that's
But
kind
that's why
of
I'm
my
speculating.
point.
I'm speculating right now.
I think that if we're speculating, I don't see Marvel giving up the top position, right? they've done so much work to build these universes.
Oh, Disney will own the entire world in
Yeah,
7
like,
years.
I'm not
Are
worried
we
about
talking
that.
about Disney changing to more streaming?
I mean, we keep talking about it, but they're clearly
we will
not.
come along to that. Well, okay.
Is that a topic?
Let's work towards this because there is something that ties into this, I think, with Disney Plus, whereby all of the older non-MCU Marvel films have a new designation on Disney Plus within the streaming service, which is Marvel Legacy. And I think giving them a specific brand like that is a massive step towards this MCU multiverse.
Yeah.
I think giving it a name makes it a property that they can do a crossover with like that. So
What do
you
they
know,
call the Star Wars one?
Legends.
Legends. Similar kind of concept, right?
Yeah. And then they can do anything with it. I think
You can tap into it, bring in Hugh Jackman. Oh
Exactly,
yeah, it's
yeah.
a legacy thing.
I think why they're fucking around with this multiverse is because then they can just pick and choose
yeah.
any little thing from the past, anything that could make them some money. And
It's the smartest way to do it.
Because that's what they basically want to do
Financially, yeah.
is they want to have like ways to configure things for product market fit. So hey, this got like Keanu Reeves is in the cultural zeitgeist and picking up. We've got access to this character. We do this. Okay, we're bringing out this film. You know, they can. I know it sounds very like marketing driven, but
that's what
it
is.
is
It's
marketing
Disney.
driven.
Yeah.
So
But it's also, I mean, like, just think about it.
sorry,
This is
Sorry to
a
burst
very
everyone's bubble.
obvious way to bring in things like Deadpool,
Yeah.
which we knew they were going to have to do somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
Fuck Deadpool. worst superhero of all time.
Or sure.
He is definitely not a good superhero in terms of
Yeah,
actually
that's what I'm
being
saying.
a hero. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
But I mean, you're right. It means that they can bring in any number of. They could bring in Charles Xavier as either pick one.
Did Julie de-age him like they did in X-Men 3 for the whole movie?
They could bring in both iterations of the Fantastic Four, which is
Oh.
about on par with what they're doing with fucking Electro. That is
Wow.
such a weird place to start with this whole
It
prospect.
starts turning into Power Rangers.
I still
at this
think.
rate.
I still think that it would be fine. I think that's it's the most obvious choice to go with Electro. Like I know.
Wow.
We went through this last time.
Not
You
not,
can't bring
not,
in-
not Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
No, because all right. So it also depends on how they're doing
Electro.
it. It also
That is
depends on
the
how they're,
most obvious. Okay, discuss.
it depends on how they're doing it, right?
Bring this-
No,
If-
we
if
can't
they're
do
bringing-
that. Everything depends on how they're doing it.
No, I'm saying like
I'm saying if you just want to pick a property, a part of a previous franchise that is
Yeah.
going to get people excited,
yeah, then you wouldn't have picked Iron Man or Thor.
No, it's because they
no, something
the-
pre-existing with an attached actor from another franchise. You wouldn't say Jamie Foxx's Electro.
I think you would.
you are fucked.
It makes
You're
sense.
insanity.
No,
What are
it's-
you
it's
Connor, this is
talking about?
such a Connor hindsight.
No,
in
no, we
2020.
did this-
I
we-
knew that was
I-
going to happen in the movie.
There's no way because I talked about this last week. Because if you take an
The news
existing
was
property
out
that people
last
already
week.
love, then you're not only risking that you fuck up that character, but it's coming with so much
Marvel's not
like
worried
high
about that.
expectation baggage. Whereas if you take Electro, I mean, this is a chance to bring in a character that people
Bring in
don't
James
have any
Franco.
particular. People don't have any particular attachment to.
Mary
to them.
Jane Watson, played by Shailene Woodley from a cut scene in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Woo! I'm sorry, brother. I just can't follow you down there. Like, I understand what you're saying because, yes, they risk nothing by trying to rejuvenate something that they fucked up the first time. But I'm just saying in terms of getting people hyped for the concept of an ongoing multiverse story.
I think the
what they would want to do
MCU
is bring in something that people do love. Like when Wolverine shows up in X-Men or something. It's like, holy shit, Wolverine's in First Class. That's really cool. You know, they
Was
don't-
it though?
They don't. It was really cool in First Class.
Oh, in
they
First
they,
Class,
they
yeah.
don't bring in Toad from X-Men as people are like, Ray Park is here.
But that's again.
It was
That's
Darth Maul.
if you're looking at it from a point of like people being like really excited for Electro, and I don't think that that's what people are going to go watch this film for.
Oh, please,
Like,
can we stop talking
Jonah
about this?
Jameson makes sense, you know, because people love him and they love that actor in that
My
role
point
as that
exactly.
character.
It's
no,
coming with
it's the
too
opposite
much
of what you're
baggage.
saying. Yes.
I remain skeptical. I remain
course.
very, very
Always.
skeptical.
That's a good idea. I mean,
on the MCU, and I wonder if I'm going to become a DC guy.
We've
Oh,
pivoted.
fuck the MCU. Woo!
Oh man, I am so keen. I'm so keen for these bloody TV series that are coming out. Though there's been a bunch of Falcon and Winter Soldier photos coming out.
that one division. Wait, you're not keen for WandaVision?
Oh, WandaVision, yeah.
Oh,
You're just throwing out shit again. I'm not really sold on these TV shows.
He just mentioned Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I gave my bodily response to that.
Have you seen the photos that he's talking about?
No. No, I refuse to.
That's fine. You'll see them eventually when they're in the
I'll see
TV
them
show.
when they're moving in front of my eyes.
I'm definitely more excited for WandaVision than I am for Falcon and.
More excited for
I'm,
WandaVision than I am
I'm
for
really not
anything.
vibing MCU right now. Like I'm in
Clearly.
a very non-MCU
Interesting.
mode.
I think that is actually you have really stumbled onto a point there whereby it's just been that long since a release because it's such a cyclical. You watch a movie, you get excited for the next one, and it's been such a pause right now. It's like, there's one coming up next year that's a prequel. There's no momentum.
Who gives a fuck? Like the main story arc, the big story arc's complete.
It's also it's the timing of when they've had this gap, right? Because there's nothing there's no cliffhanger, there's nothing keeping you on the edge of your seat, really. Like it's
Imagine, I'm not sure what direction this would even go in, but imagine if this happened like pre-Infinity War and Endgame, or like in between somehow. Even
oh,
though
it
they
would be
should-
insane.
Be like-
People would be losing their fucking minds.
They would imagine if they had it's like, oh, Endgame's coming out in theaters, and then
We'd be having a completely different conversation. So yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the timing of how this.
No
when this
big
happened.
discussion on this because we're way off track. But do you think if Endgame had been delayed the way Black Widow is and eventually got released, COVID or whatever, do you think it would have done better or worse than it did?
worse.
Oh,
I would probably tend to agree. Yeah.
That's
I
interesting.
think the
I
fact
guess
that 1 year time frame was so hammered in.
yeah,
I just think it would have just edged it. I would edge 10-15% off.
Takes the air out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
it'll
about
be interesting to
expectation.
see-
It's about delivering on expectation, right? Even
Yeah.
with Tenet, it's like
It'll be interesting to see when the first movies that kind of come out in the mainstream of films that have been delayed, how they do, whether it's kind of marred by this kind of, apathy that people have developed potentially, or whether people are like, fuck, I've waited for this for so long. I am so keen on this. It could, I don't know which way it's going to go. And it'll be really,
We'll never be able to find out either because
Yeah, but that-
there's not going to be a switch that flips and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, the world's safe again. You can go back. It's
Yeah.
always going to be
I
stagnant.
think we're at a really big stage where we've held on to a lot of these industries and stuff, and it's sad that the floor has fallen beneath them. Like it's really sad.
I'm
But
working it, brother.
like this whole narrative that everyone pushes, like we've heard it before with going from the analog film days to the digital age. Oh, digital sucks. Digital this. Digital looks amazing. Look at what stuff David Fincher produces. Same kind of narrative here with like the cinema. You're not going to experience it on the cinema. Mate, I've watched things on my phone that have emotionally affected me. Like, you know what I mean? Obviously, it's a different experience. I love going to the cinema. But like, Haunting of Hill House deeply affected me. And I watched that at home. Like, I think the paradigm shift, like, we're going to talk about this in a sec, but the paradigm shift is going to happen fast. And I don't think it's not like people are not going to get as much enjoyment out of stuff, So like, I understand like from an industry perspective, super sad, but some of these narrative pushes, it's very sort of geared with an agenda, to me,
yeah, I get that. Should we move on to the next piece of news? Just
Ah!
Oh my God, George screamed so loud the camera angle changed. So, yes,
It's very abrasive.
this is just basically a follow-up to what we've been talking about all year, but Pixar's Soul will be releasing directly to Disney Plus as Mulan did. I'm not sure if it's going to be exactly the same release thing because Mulan is now obviously available on demand everywhere else as well as Disney Plus, which is really interesting. Like Apple
Gradual
movies
rollout.
and stuff. Yeah.
makes sense because then you want. Yeah, it does make sense. I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. So obviously they have decided that this is viable enough for them to keep pushing it, because Pixar, while this isn't one of their big franchise movies, Pixar is a big cash cow for them.
But I mean, there's precedent for that.
That's the
because
correct
they-
response.
That's what they did with their previous Pixar release, which was Onward.
So yes, Onward was a very tumultuous time though. That had released to theaters, then everywhere shut down, and they had to kind of roll
Continue
with the
out
insane
its-
situation
yeah.
that was going on. This is obviously a much more calculated move, saying theaters are open, and I'm not sure if this is releasing in theaters in other parts of the world where it's okay, like here, because Mulan didn't release here in theaters, even though we've got pretty fully operating theaters right now. Yeah, this is the future.
I think I believe they're restructuring the business, right, to be more focused on streaming.
So how do you think that this, 2-3 years from now, when hopefully COVID is not an issue, how do you see that this working? Like, do you think that they will release digital on the same day that they release theater? Do you think it'll be like a week or two apart, a month apart?
I
Like,
think
how do
there'll
you
be like there's going to be now another tier. There's going to be more tiers. Like now it's like it goes to streaming or it goes
access
to
to
cinema.
like our premium?
There'll be like it's at the cinema and it's on streaming platforms, or it's just on the streaming platform, or it's the premium pricing. I think there's going to be a lot of different configurations that they'll need to probably test and reiterate on to figure out, because this is a whole new model. Like this is a whole new uncharted territory. Like what is the model? They're going to have to figure that out. And previously Netflix did all the groundwork there because they were the early movers in the market.
Well, they were an alternate distribution model. They weren't
but in terms
doing
of
it in
streaming,
conjunction.
in
right?
terms of streaming, like
Yeah.
Disney, they didn't have to do nearly as much R&D because they just go, oh, look, the interface. We just kind of sort of.
So I guess my point is that like what they're going to have to figure out now is how do we, release theater and streaming and make it like do the most money.
Yeah.
Do the most money.
Yeah.
Do the
Make-
money.
Make
20
the most money out
millions.
of that, or make it like kind of strategically do that. Whereas before it was, do I release it theatrically or do I go to Netflix?
And I think it's one of those things where you're going to have to know your market. Like a horror film. Maybe a horror film's going to do better at a cinema, or maybe, a kid's film's going to do better on a streaming platform because it's more convenient. Like, I think there's going to be so much more diversity in the way they release. Is that a technical thing? Error playing you.
2 in a row.
Luckily, though, we've all lost interest in whatever we're talking about, so we can move on to movie book
Christ.
club.
Well, wait. There was one other piece of like
No.
semi-news.
There was no more.
Go ahead.
Do we want to talk about the Batman?
Shut down, is it?
Well, the shutdown, and there's also
Rumors.
rumors of.
I'm not indulging in this nonsense, please.
I love Joe Rogan, but one thing he has done for the world is he's fucking put a flame under conspiracy theories. I reckon. He's just made it like okay for you to believe whatever the fuck. And I'm not saying that.
fairly
is
certain
not,
you've just started a 35-minute conversation right
if
now, and
that
I need
is
to leave.
not- Yeah. And if that is not, and that is not saying that's not saying anything about him not or having corona.
Are you
Wait, what?
alleging?
What are you
are you
talking
alleging
about?
that Joe
Movie
Rogan
book
knowingly and
club.
willingly?
Did I just like black out and like miss
Yes.
where
Yes,
you
you
explained
did.
what the hell you're talking about?
I think it was a
I'm
little. I think it was a
trying to
little
move
meta
on.
joke he was making. Anyway, carry on, George. You're in charge.
Movie book club.
Yeah.
Round 21. Round 21.
22.
21.
Is it actually 21?
22 if we had
Oh.
Scanner Darkly.
Oh.
The Fallen.
Need to update my naming.
The Fallen.
Yeah, this was your pick, Ben. Do you want to run us through what your 2 picks were and which one you want to talk about first?
Yeah, sure. So as I led on the show last week, we decided to do a double feature of horror movies each week for Spooky Halloween, and I just kind of opened a list of just random movies that I like that I keep on my phone before the show, and saw instantly like 5 that I wanted to pick. I'm like, shit. And then we got to the end of the show and I opened it again and saw an additional 6. I'm like, huh. So I kind of just picked whatever jumped out at me. And I think what I've actually managed to do here is pick like the most random double feature that anyone's ever put together of movies.
They don't belong together at all,
Not
apart from the fact that
whatsoever,
they
yeah.
sort of share the genre, sort of,
Not
of
even
horror.
not even close. And I find it's like I don't know, chocolate and peanut butter or something. They really complement each other nicely. I
In
picked-
weird ways, yeah.
I picked Housebound, a little Kiwi comedy from 2012, 2014.
14.
Huh?
14.
Don't interrupt.
Fuck you. Fuck y'all.
Speak when spoken to, you little shit.
He said, speaking to him. I had seen this many years ago. I could not remember at all off the top of my head how much it tips its hat as to being a comedy. So I kind of wanted to just show it to you guys going in blind because I remembered it was surprisingly scary. So I'm like, maybe this could be a little bait and switch for them. Didn't necessarily turn out that way. But and I also picked the Neon Demon, something I watched I think last year. Nicholas Rending with Riffen.
I'm really glad that you were fucking up the name because I've been practicing it all afternoon.
Nicholas Winding Refn film that I watched, and man, this fucking thing just washed over me. And it's one of those ones that I'm not sure I enjoyed in the moment, but it stayed with me for a long time and was really keen to revisit. And spent all week dreading that I had made you guys sit through it as well. But yeah, random 2 movies.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Can we talk about Neon Demon first?
Sure.
Because this is the way. This is the order that I watched them in.
Mhm.
I watched Neon Demon first.
I did it the other way.
Interesting.
I also did it the other way.
I've watched I think 2 of his films previously. I don't know how many he's released.
A few at this point.
Yeah.
So you've seen Drive.
Place Beyond the Pines.
Oh no, I've seen 4 then. I've seen 3.
Oh, different dude.
It is a different dude, isn't it?
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So no, I've seen
Wait,
Drive.
the guy who did Drive didn't do Place Beyond the Pines?
Who did,
Ryan
really?
Gosling's in it.
who did Place Beyond the Pines?
Oh,
Freddie.
Freddie.
It's
Thank
Freddie.
God.
I was waiting
Like
for the
Cher.
second half of that.
Yeah.
Like what?
Like-
You're typing it in.
No, why is there not a film director just called Freddie? Like, why do they all have to have second name? The pompous fucks.
Your internet shit. So
Oh,
it's not
no.
going anywhere.
Yeah.
So
My God, there's 2 Connors here.
so salty. Can you look up what his last few films
Yes.
are? Anyway, so I've watched that. I've watched the one with Ryan Gosling.
Only God forgives.
Only God Forgives. That's the other
Mm.
one.
Derek Gian-France did Place
Derek
Beyond the Pines.
Jeter.
Can you look up what else Nicholas Winding
Refn.
Refn has done? Anyway, so but I was pretty sure I had a good grasp on his style, and so I went into this pretty confident that I knew what it was going to be like. There's going to be lots of pauses, lots of like kind of techno low beat music,
Slow,
and
unnatural dialogue.
slow unnatural dialogue, lots of staring off into space, and like interruptions with kind of just beautiful shots. And lo and behold, oh, and there's going to be lots of gore, like, with people getting their stomachs slashed open, which apparently is a theme with this guy.
Sudden, quite shocking gore. I'd say, is his thing.
Yeah.
Beautiful cinematography. Like,
So why
his
don't we start there?
The crispness of the imagery, the photo quality is just very, very crisp, very shiny. It's got almost like this.
Shiny.
It almost feels futuristic.
Guys, I watched like a 4K transfer of this on like a fucking 60-inch UHD TV. Amazing.
It's
Visually, this movie is stunning, as are his previous films.
but there's a sharpness that David Fincher brings with like the detail, but this one has almost like a shininess, like a luminescence to it.
It's his
in
lighting. It's the way that he does
Yeah.
lighting and color. Like and I mean, it does feel very much like neon. I mean,
About to say, one could almost call it neon.
yeah. And it that really translates well through, particularly if you've got a good TV and particularly good sound as well. I was listening to this with headphones on, and it's
so good.
it's
It's one of those soundtracks that you're like, I could bop to this.
Yeah. So
But
I mean,
a huge emphasis on those qualities.
Yeah.
That's very much where his emphasis as a film director is. Narratively, he's very unfocused in a way. Like he
he
it's the
focuses on
image.
like feelings and like tones.
You could imagine him if he was
just-
to sort of pick his brains on the sort of qualities between a book and a novel and a film. I think he would see a lot more of a discrepancy than maybe we've had in our conversations.
Well, the way
where
he makes films, yeah.
his mindset is very much he's so visually driven.
Oh, because Drive as a book would be like 60 pages long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and
Exactly.
I mentioned it in the previous part of the episode, which was that if I had to read the novelization of this book, I'd be done in 10 minutes and I'd be bored.
Mm.
But
No, so it's a
it
picture
leaves
book.
leaves an impression regardless, you know.
Yeah, so he's very into making or building atmosphere and tension.
Mm.
But I don't think he could write a character to save his life.
Mm.
At least anyone that I'd be interested in, knowing more about or seeing. I mean, I think this, apart from like the visual nuances of this film, I found it very kind of one-dimensional.
Dry.
Yeah, these aren't characters like his other films. These are ideas, I think. And
Yeah, I mean,
Motifs.
but like even like very, very simplistic ones
Yeah,
of Keanu Reeves' character I found very
Keanu-y.
strange in that he just kind of seemed like his character didn't. I felt like it didn't mean anything. It wasn't, like he wasn't an interesting character. I didn't really care about.
it's interesting in the fact that it was Keanu Reeves in this weird.
There was,
little
yeah, I mean,
role
there was
in a
that,
movie.
yes, but I mean, just like he was not seen at a, he just kind of left the movie at one point, and I was like, I couldn't care less. Like I wasn't curious as to what happened to him.
Well, one of the big things I took away from these two films, comparing and contrasting them, is how much, if I'm invested in the characters, I am much more enthralled in the film.
Mm.
So like every little thing is that much more heightened for me. So particularly in a horror film, if I'm invested in the characters, I'm going to be that much more scared, you know. And I'm not saying that these films are trying to do a similar thing. They're trying to do a very, very different thing. But I'm very much sort of like spectating in the Neon Demon. Like I'm sort of watching this
From afar.
Yeah, whilst with the other one, Hell House or Housebound. Sorry, Hell House. Fuck
Hell
yeah.
Housebound.
I feel like I'm there with the characters. You know?
Yeah. And I mean, that's
just vision, and that's just a directional choice.
You could start this movie, Neon Demon. You could start it at any point, and you wouldn't be worse for wear on it. Like it I don't feel as though you really need to begin at the beginning, so to speak, because it is about.
It's more.
It's the visualization. It's the atmosphere. It's the tension. It's all that, and there's no kind of driving force behind it. Like
I think it's got a lot on its mind. It's about as subtle as a sledgehammer, but I think it's really doing some interesting things in terms of kind of theme and in terms of a movie that's dealing with not necessarily gender politics, but how the world treats women and
or how
values,
how
women treat women as well,
yeah.
and how they're valued for their beauty. It kind of stands apart from simpler films that I would say are so much more black and white about, girl power and stuff, kind of the pop feminism stuff. Whereas this is like virtually all the characters in this are women, and they run the gamut from, the innocent little doe-eyed Elle Fanning to like literal cannibals. I'm like, that is a really interesting dynamic to be examining in such an abstract way that's really not like I said, it's not subtle, but it's also not like throwing a message down your head. It's like, this is just
it felt like a
view of the
movie
world.
that took an interesting theme and decided that they were going to be really kind of pseudo cerebral about it, and kind of. I mean, it's someone trying to make an art project.
I mean,
which is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I mean, this is well into the realm of more art house film.
Yeah. But when I think that, to your point, George, when I'm watching a film, I kind of want to, in some ways, be swept away by it. And I think that there's two things that allow me to do that, one of which is plot and the other is character.
Neither of which are present in this film.
Exactly, right? I need one of those. I don't care which it is.
Yeah.
And the
Both
thing
would
that
be excellent.
I mean, both is the ultimate pinnacle. But I mean, when I think so, just to kind of compare this to something like Tenet, which we've kind of discussed in this vein as well, didn't have great character,
Mm.
but it definitely had very interesting plot and
Yep.
mechanics, right? And that kept me going. I was interested. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, fuck, I want to figure this out, all that. Whereas this, I was kind of like, I could start and stop this movie whenever. There's nothing keeping me here. There's nothing driving me.
But the
It's
visuals
a
are
gorgeous
astounding.
visual.
Yeah.
Oh, and I mean,
And
while
for
I'm
some
watching
people,
it, I'm
that's
not.
going to be. I reckon somebody who's more into music, like maybe in somebody who's not even into those movies to our level, they could go watch this and maybe even get more out of it. 'Cause it's almost like a music video, right?
Mm.
It very much is. And, I think that if you approach it like that,
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it.
So I was surprised by this film. This was my second time watching it last night, and we started it at about 1:45, and I was tired watching Housebound. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this movie. Then I was like, oh fuck, I have work tomorrow. I have to watch it tonight. And it started up, and my first kind of thoughts were like, I don't know if I actually like this movie. I don't remember if I enjoyed it, and why the fuck did I ask the boys to watch this? Because this is like, this isn't even a horror movie.
It's like when you recommend Drive to someone and you're like, oh, this is a real like gamble.
Yeah,
as
that
to
movie
whether
was super hyped up as well. And I was quite disappointed with it when it came out. And I think revisiting it, I'd probably think it's pretty solid. But as it stands, rewatching this, I was surprisingly enthralled. I can't believe how well I made it through it. It's a long movie, and getting all the way to 2 a.m. watching this, I was like, I'm really digging this. And each scene that would go by, we got like a third into the movie, and I'm like, I remember everything that's already happened. I can't remember anything else that happens in this movie, but each scene came by, I'm like, oh, this.
Yeah.
And I was just really digging it. Even when it goes into this weird, like random, like 6-minute trance sequence in a club, I'm just like, man, this is really odd and experimental.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded, it made me feel how I wanted to feel watching that Robert Pattinson space movie.
High Life.
Yeah, which I think had some kind of similar motifs in it. But
Yeah.
I fucking enjoyed it more than I expected watching it a second time. And it also scared the shit out of me at the end when one of those models took a swing at Elle Fanning when she was running inside the house. It really surprised me because I forgot that movie actually does get a little creepy towards the end. What is something so interesting about this film, which really shut me off, was it was on Netflix for a spell. And I, luckily enough, had already seen it and kind of gotten what I needed to out of it. But you know how when you hover over something on Netflix, it plays a little preview? You know what the first image to pop up in the preview is? It's the model eating the eyeball at the end of the film. I'm like, that's probably not what you should do as like the teaser image for this film.
No kidding.
That's a real good way to get a witch reaction out of Connor for this. But yeah, so I
mean, I'm lucky because, as I said, I know this guy's style, and like, I knew what I was going for going in. Like, that's, if you were to show this to someone, just kind of
out of the blue,
I think you'd have some fairly disappointed people. But
potentially, I mean, it depends on the audience you're looking at. Like I said, I was surprised on my second viewing at how much I enjoyed it. But I definitely had the thought that the guys probably won't like this too much because I love what you're saying about plot and character because I definitely agree with that. But I also do really strive to kind of take in things that are a little more off the beaten path and try to get my own thing out of them.
Look, it's a gorgeous music video, and it's very cerebral music video. But that's how I would describe it.
I think what I will say in terms of thematics was it was interesting to see the different. Like I feel like there was a little bit of Black Swan in this for me. And, in Black Swan, you kind of had, oh, here's the new girl, here's the old girl. It was kind of like a bit of a duality, whilst I feel like this one, there was a few different combinations of experiences that different people were at with their, like, the girl with the plastic surgery, the main girl who didn't have any plastic surgery, the washed up, there was like...
You kind of see how they've all been inundated into this world.
It was almost like what I wanted Velvet Buzzsaw to be, in a way. There was like some of those underlying things there that I wanted to explore even more. But like some of those areas, there's like almost like a little bit... Within this style, it's hard to ask for more, but I kind of wanted almost like those areas to be even more explored in a way,
Well, they were touching on, the concept or the kind of folklore of crones, like the three witches, and they pop up in like Shakespeare and a bunch of other things. And I thought that that's kind of what they were going for. Like I thought that they were going to delve into this supernatural aspect, which I thought would have been really cool. Ultimately they didn't go there. They didn't say no to that, but they didn't actually explore it. And so there's no kind of confirmation about what they were per se.
Suspiria as well. This also reminded me a lot of the new Suspiria.
Yeah. So I think that
Quite an interesting film, quite an interesting combination that doesn't fully nail it for me, but
Suspiria or this.
one.
Yeah. I think, look, I'm going to stick by what I said before is that it's a very interesting music video, right? And I think that, I don't say that necessarily as a bad thing. In fact, I'd say I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but it does well to set expectations. I think that there was
I feel
more
like
interest
that's
in his
dumbing it
previous
down
films.
too much, though. I think it has a little bit more to say than.
It's a long, beautiful music video.
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, I'll reiterate. I think there's a lot on this movie's mind, and I think you could
Oh, yeah.
kind of dissect it for a long time.
But I think that's also, I also think that music videos can be incredibly interesting, and you can say a lot with music video. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but and people try and do things. They try and introduce interesting themes, with metal bands and horror aspects into their music videos. Hey.
Oh, who would do such a thing?
What?
Yeah. So I definitely don't say that as a bad thing, but I do think that it kind of encapsulates on the fact that you can't develop character, you can't develop plot. You kind of have to you need to kind of glaze over a lot of things in order to, and then let the audience kind of connect the dots, which is a cool thing to do. It just doesn't really grip me in the same way that a more conventional
it's a very
story
different type of viewing
might do.
experience and something like that. I'm kind of happy and set in the idea that I'll be able to enjoy this film for a long time to come in the same way I have with this second viewing, and that I'll probably just forget everything because there's not much to latch onto in terms of story within it. So I'll be able to just experience it again. And watching it last night in what was definitely a superior setup to what I did last time was just, I loved it, having it wash over me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of, these are movies that I wouldn't normally rewatch, but I am kind of interested to rewatch Only God Forgives and Drive. And apparently he has a new one that's a TV miniseries called Too Old to Die Young. But all those,
I don't totally know if I love this guy's style. I respect him.
I agree.
Think he has his own unique vision. And I think if you go to his film, as a filmography, I think he has a really nice style that flows through it all. I haven't seen the Pusher trilogy, but I think him as an artist and a filmmaker, he's very interesting. I just don't necessarily know if his sensibilities fully appeal to me.
He clearly came from outside of the Hollywood system, which
Yeah.
just reminds me, I love this as a Hollywood movie. Kind
Totally.
of just capturing that fucking dark underbelly of this horrible facade of this place. Yeah, I didn't like Drive particularly much. I didn't see Only God Forgives. I've heard it's like kind of repulsive and divisive, but I got to check it out.
It is a little bit, but I mean, that's not the issue that I had with it. The issue I had with it was much the same as that I've had with the other ones, which is that it's a lot of really pretty shit and no real narrative structure. Although I would say that the Neon Demon is probably the least amount of narrative structure out of all of them.
Shall we move on to a much different film?
A entirely different one. And I messaged you, Ben, about 30 minutes into this film where it all became clear. Because as I told you, I was watching it and I was kind of baffled as to why you recommended this, because it was just such a tropey horror film, and I was like, there has got to be some, like, at first I was thinking, is it because it's from New Zealand that you were like,
Ben, just think
So you weren't enjoying this?
the first 20 minutes?
Oh, dude, I was in this from the first minute.
Rewatching this last night, because as I said, I wasn't sure how early they tipped their hat about the comedy thing. And watching it again last night, I'm like, oh, from the very first scene, this is a comedy. Okay, cool.
What was the first scene again on this?
When he
robbing
whacks
the-
himself
the
with the
bank.
thing.
Oh
But I
my
mean,
the
God,
mallet.
so good.
so, but I didn't quite catch on to that, and so I was kind of like going, him hitting himself. I was like,
Lazy
whatever.
storytelling.
Yeah, and then
Also, I've seen people do that with hammers, so I'm like, all right, plausible. But then, and the kind of, you're being relegated to this house. The interactions with the mother. I couldn't quite tell if the movie was was just relying on tropes or whether it was doing it
I don't think it
kind
it
of
didn't feel
on
tropey to me.
the first 20, 30 minutes.
No.
Mate, it was
When have I
like,
seen? Okay, I have.
there was literally like this Jesus thing that like, fell onto her as this false scare. Like the music is so tropey. It's like,
I completely disagree. I think this
Oh
is.
my God,
I
come on.
I honestly think as a first feature, yeah, maybe I could see your argument from
Oh.
to say that there are maybe some elements where, hey, I've seen that before, or
I should clarify though, right? Because I think that they did that intentionally now. After that 30-minute mark, because I was like, oh, I see what this film is doing, because it became more and more almost satirical. And I was like, then it breached that moment where it was like, this is intentional. This isn't just them, ripping on tropes. One of the points that just before it clicked for me was when she was in the backyard and she's smoking and she's looking at the evil dude next door and he was giving her the stink eye. I was like, that's such a horror movie trope, right? Of like just kind of stock standard, the guy that you meet out of town and warns you about going in there, like that kind of shit.
Mm.
And then I think the next scene is where she goes to and like beats up the officer, and he uttered the lines, or like, and he became like an investigator. I was like, I'm so fucking on board with this film. I fell in love with that film at that point. I was like, you couldn't drag me away anymore, and I fucking loved it for the rest of the hour.
because for me, I didn't see any distinct like, oh, this is that moment. I thought it was a very sincere. I didn't see any satire really. Like maybe I looked at it as a very like narratively dense. Like quite a lot happens in this. And I feel like it's almost like that first album, that first feature where you're sort of packing every idea you've ever had into this thing. It's like, this could be my one and only chance.
And it might be.
Yeah, well,
yeah, because he hasn't done anything since this.
He's done TV. He's done some TV stuff.
And
it's Netflix.
It reminded me, it had elements of that Wes Craven film, The People Under the Stairs, with the people living in the walls and stuff. I thought this film was going down a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like spiritual,
supernatural.
That's the word I'm looking for. I thought it was going more down.
That's
very intentional.
It has some very like clear twists,
and then it goes some more this way, and then it has this sort of story with this psychiatric hospital and stuff, and none of it is super poignant or anything, but I think as a fun horror film that twists and turns, like it's super satisfying.
So that's what I want to say. I think this movie is really surprising, and I had forgotten a lot of it. Again, like Neon Demon, I think I enjoyed my second viewing more, which is the great thing about sharing movies with people, is that I think this movie is like really successful as a comedy, really successful as a horror, and like really successful narratively as well. It's actually an interesting story that could be a cool mystery or a cool horror on its own, or a cool comedy as it is as well.
Yeah.
Do you know one of the really interesting things about this, because there's so many twists and turns. I figured that I had it pegged, or not pegged, but I thought that there was like a pretty serious possibility that this was all an invention from the mom and the dad, or the stepdad. Because the scene before everything kicks off, she's like, we're going to teach her some manners type thing. And then all this haunting stuff starts to really
I thought it was
kick off.
the mum as well.
So I was like, I think there was one point where I was like, all right, obviously not. But like, I thought that would have been a cool little aspect to it. And it kept playing in my mind to like...
And I think it's trying to do that stuff. I think this movie is as hard to pick as a Kiwi's sense of humor.
Yeah.
Because we've worked with a Kiwi guy at the cinema.
Yeah.
And man, for the first 6 months, nobody ever knew if that guy was joking or being the biggest dick in the world or just being super serious. It was weird.
We can't lay that on the feet of the Kiwis. Like, that's not fair.
I think that is this. I think that's extremely their dry sense of humor, and I think that really comes through in this film.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine this movie being quite as successful if it was, set in Kentucky or some shit. I think taking a familiar situation like a haunted house and chucking it somewhere as charismatic as New Zealand and bringing all these actors and creators in. I'm like,
whoever plays that Amos guy is like, just, he made that line of, you can't punch ectoplasm. For me, I just
And the bit where he plays the tape back and nothing.
Yeah.
You're like, fuck.
But see, this is
Too
all right.
much
You know,
suspense.
this is my point about the tropey thing. Like they were doing all the right angles, all the
Yeah.
right music that you would hear if
Yeah.
that was being played
Yeah.
with like creepy music
Yeah.
or a creepy like sound. So I was like, he's very intentionally pulling out all the tropes of the genre.
That's the thing. It was effective, as I said, as both doing the comedy and the horror elements of it. Which, when you put the horror stuff done kind of rotely in that context, it becomes
It's
extra
perfect.
funny. Yeah,
It's so good. I mean, if there hadn't been the comedy aspect to this, I do not think I would have given this a second thought.
Oh no,
'Cause it
but
wouldn't
I
have-
think I don't think. I think that's the thing. Okay, so one thing is just my personal experience of just releasing music recently. When people go, "Oh, what genre is it?" and we're actually trying to not be in a genre, so and that's a mind fuck for people. So this guy is like writing this film, and his thing in his head, he's probably thinking like, I'm writing a horror film that is funny as well. Well, is it a horror or is it a comedy? Well, it's kind of both. But yeah, but which one is it, dude? Which one is it more? Is it more a horror or is it, well, I was just trying to create the best film that I could create. Do you know what I mean? So it sort of hits
Yeah.
this point where the conversation, it has comedic elements, it has horror elements, but, you know, like go watch the film and take it on its own merits. Do you know what I mean?
So I distinctly remember when I first watched this, and this is probably when I was still less experienced in horror movies. I remember finding this quite creepy.
Dude, it was scary as fuck.
And it stuck with me, even just the idea of a guy in the walls, even though that's so played in a silly way for the most part. And, you know, the guy looks so goofy, but he keeps appearing in random places. It's kind of scary. But like the teddy bear thing, that really scared me when I was first watching this.
Fucking
And
scary.
it really convinced me that this was a supernatural situation because I'm like,
Yeah.
there's no way they can explain how that happened. I feel like they kind of effectively did.
Yeah.
But I also think it probably has the biggest laugh for me that any horror comedy has ever given me, which is when the lights go out at the house and they're flipping on the breakers trying to get
Oh
them
my
back.
god, that was
And there's
fucking
this
hilarious.
like quite good jump scare where the guy is like standing right there behind the dude and the lights go back off and this dude's like, oh no, that was the one.
yeah.
I'm like, that was amazing. And can you imagine how well that would play like on the festival circuit? Because I think that's how I initially heard about this movie. It was kind of people raving about it back
It'd
in the
have
day.
been
But that Kiwi humor, it's like got an innocence to it. Like it's not super like
It's like
convoluted,
jovial.
crazy, like super subvert. It's like it's sort of like it's almost slapsticky in a way, and it's charming and endearing. And
It's funny that you mentioned that, or that you kind of gravitated towards this, because when we were thinking about picks for Halloween, one of my potential picks was going to be a comedy horror that is produced in New Zealand.
yeah,
What we do in the shadows.
And no, different one
Oh.
before that.
Black Sheep.
Yeah, that's the other one.
Eh,
There's only
good
like
one.
It's only two.
yeah, there's
that's-
like
that's
two
all of
main
them.
I
ones.
love that one though.
So that's the one that my mind went to because
I guess Peter Jackson has a few. But
it's really interesting
Yeah,
that,
he's not-
that we have
doesn't
that
count.
same kind of, or that the New Zealand sense of humor is so well attuned,
Mm.
or maybe unique. I'm not even sure how to describe it, but it's it works.
Great performances across the board here. Really
Love the
enjoyable. I honestly think like
From Hunt for the Wilder People.
Oh yeah,
I think this does have the Evil Dead. It reminds me of Evil Dead as well. Sorry, not
Yeah.
Evil Dead. What's the Peter Jackson one?
Brain Dead?
Brain Dead. Brain Dead.
oh.
Reminds
I
me
mean,
of Brain Dead.
you're not wrong about the Evil Dead either, though.
Yeah.
It's that kind of schlucky, almost Sam Raimi
Yeah.
type
Mm.
horror. I mean,
Yeah.
what's that one with the chick in the elevator? Sam Raimi horror film about the old lady that puts a curse on.
Oh, Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah, yeah. It felt a little bit like that, which is like a little bit more on the nose on the comedy aspect, but it had that schlucky horror film.
Mm. Well,
Feel to
which I feel like it revealed quite slowly because it wasn't until like they blow up the guy's head at the end when I was like, "Whoa!" I loved how
Yeah.
they'd kind of held back on that element of things,
Yeah.
for most of it. But
It was a slow burn for like the grotesque horror stuff.
Mm.
But you can feel the love, and you can feel like these guys probably didn't get paid a fucking dollar for this film, but there's so much love and care, and the DIY. I could be completely wrong here. This could be funded out of its ass. But I feel like there's a DIY aspect to this film that just appeals to me, and I love that. Like the Neon Demon, amazing, but the wealth of resources on that production would have been.
It's a very produced piece of film.
There's just something about this type of film that really appeals to my sensibilities.
Well, I thought this
and
felt very polished.
It does. I'm not taking it away from
Yeah.
it, but I feel like.
But no, obviously the context it came from, like that is kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
But this feels like a couple $1 million in it. Maybe a sub $1 million, $2 million. Neon Demon's probably 10 million or something. Who knows? Anyway, I absolutely love this. Maybe the only thing I could fault it on is it feels a bit first featurey, and there's so much plot in it that it's kind of crazy. But that's kind of part of why I loved it.
It's the charm, right? That's why
It's
I
like
thought
goes on
this
this
was like
crazy
satire,
adventure.
right? Because they're just. I mean, it's the kind of double, take or reveal, and I think that was intentional, in the style.
Well, yeah, what really mostly surprised me about it on this review was how plot heavy it was and
So
how
plot
strong I
heavy.
thought the plot was.
Yeah.
Because when the psychiatrist or psychologist shows up
Psychologist.
looking after her, I'm like, oh, this guy seems nice.
Yeah.
And I'd just completely forgotten that he's the villain of
Yeah.
the film.
Yeah.
And it's like such a long walk to get to that, but I
Yeah.
feel like it all fits
Do you
together
know
so
what?
well.
I actually talked to someone today who is a psychologist who does deal with criminals and people like that. So basically, what this guy in the film does. And I was just kind of curious because the clinician in the film says, there's just some bad eggs, and I was asking her about her day, with the kind of the clients, and I just wanted to know, like, what kind of difference are you making? Like, not so much are there bad eggs, but what's the prognosis for some of these people? And I was so utterly depressed, and it made so much sense why this guy went nuts, because she was just like, oh, I mean, the best that some people can hope for is that they can live on their own and maybe hold a job, but it's
Yeah.
unlikely. I'm like, wait, no, like what would be the best case scenario? Like if you had unlimited resources and unlimited, and she goes, oh no, that is.
Yeah.
It's like, can you imagine doing that day after day, just meeting people that are potentially hopeless?
I hear it's a very high suicide rate in that occupation.
Don't
Because
say
I
that.
think you take on a
Bookended
lot.
the podcast, yeah.
You take on a lot of emotional
Oh my
baggage.
God.
Of course, yeah.
Oh my God. And I mean, particularly with
And you
like
normally are quite an
forensic, like,
empathetic person if you
Yeah.
get into psychology.
yeah. Oh, it lends itself towards that kind of person. But particularly if you're in like abnormal or like, kind of forensic psychology area where you're dealing with like the worst of humanity.
Yeah, I couldn't handle that shit.
Yeah. I'm surprised we don't see more of this.
That's why I watch horror movies.
Just get it out.
Just stick to this crazy shit. No, honestly, thank you, Benny. Like, loved this.
These are two
Well,
very
you
interesting
both
books.
actually texted me separately about this movie, which I'm like, fucking, I did it.
didn't dig.
Oh, there you go.
Didn't dig Neon Demon nearly. Like, I respect
Oh.
Neon Demon, but this is for
Yeah.
me.
I'm
Well
the
ahead.
exact same. Out of the two, if I had to chuck something on right now,
I
it would
reckon I
100%
could
be
show this
House.
to my folks who are not horror movie fans, and they could probably. This could almost be like their gateway
I reckon the same.
drug.
Well, funnily
reckon so.
enough, that is kind of what I did last night. I showed this to a couple of friends, one of whom does not do horror.
Yeah.
And she got the shit scared out of her, but she really liked it. I'm like,
Yeah.
this could
Com-
be the
comedy
is it.
horrors are the way to go. I mean, I've done the exact same thing. I introduced someone to horror via Tucker and Dale's
Versus
yeah,
Evil.
yeah.
versus Evil, which is, a good. It's not that scary. It is quite funny. It's like an inversion, or like it uses a lot of the tropes. The other one is Cabin in the Woods, a little bit more kind of solid on the horror aspect. Very like cool movie.
But a lot of similarities in the punchline, but also I was listening to somebody break down like a comedy joke, as in like you sort of set this premise.
Yeah.
And then you sort of go about proving the premise, and then in the end, the punchline ties it all together. It's almost like an essay, introduction, point 1, point 2, point 3, and then summarize it again. And that's almost like a horror scare, right? Setting the scene, letting the scene sort of marinate, point 1, point 2, point 3, you kind of know something's, and then boom.
So I mean, I've said
Build
this a million times.
expectation.
Build expectation,
Yeah.
exactly.
Subvert it, potentially,
Subvert it,
which
yep.
is where both horror and you know.
Yeah.
Literally
come
just
from.
stole the words out of my mouth. I say that
absolutely.
all the time, but it's
Yeah.
that's where those.
Oh, you came up with that, did you?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is.
No,
Hang
haven't
on,
you read
hang on,
McGregor's Guide to
Ha 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 ha! I kill you.
McGregor's Guide to everything?
Yeah. I was going to say the only thing that I think that would be a disadvantage in using those movies to introduce someone to horror is that a big part of the punchline for those movies is the subverting of the genre.
Mm.
And you kind of have to know the tropes
Yeah.
of the genre. Like I can like the amount of just awesome shit that you get out of Cabin in the Woods just because like just looking at that whiteboard and all the common like you know horror.
But I think
villains, monsters.
the best are when you could show that to someone. You could show a fresher that, and they could get something out of it. And you could watch a horror veteran, and they'll be able to get more out of it.
Yeah, I think that both of those movies do that in spades.
Like
I mean,
that's what I think when you can make it approachable from different levels, and it gets subtle in the subtext where it's not beating you over the head with things, but somebody who's there, a certain audience who's like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's a reference to Hellraiser. That's this, that's that. You know, that's fun. Whilst the commoner, you know, it's like the MCU, right? It's a bit like that, eh?
the commoner.
Oh no, it is. Yes, sorry, I know what you're saying.
Maybe.
Yeah,
it's
no,
not.
I
Maybe
agree.
it's not.
I
No,
get
it
what you're
is. Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, harvesting barley from the hayfield.
Yes,
You
that's
know,
what it's. Yeah, yeah.
The hayfield. Holy fuck! It shows you how much I know about agriculture, huh?
Jesus.
Anyway, great pick. Great pick.
Thank you. Well, I really achieved my brief, which is to watch two movies that I really enjoyed.
Nice.
Thoroughly enjoyed both of them much more on the second viewing than I did the first, I think. And I gave you guys a movie that you liked and made you watch a movie that you never would otherwise. So
Yeah.
that's all I need every week.
Win. That's it.
Yeah.
So we're a horror movie podcast now. Woohoo! Woo!
Sorry that I
pick,
picked two movies that are like horror adjacent and
Yeah.
not horror movies.
Yeah.
I'd say the horror.
I'm okay with that. Like I said, I was going to pick Black Sheep. Still might.
I think, okay, so this is one of my picks, I'm going to have to deflect to you, whatever, to see if this is actually possible.
Right.
So one film that I've wanted to watch for a while that I've heard kicking around is Possum.
Mm-hmm.
Can we track that down, do you
I
think?
believe that's on Shudder.
Sick.
Mhm.
Possum. Australian horror film, right?
Nope.
Kiwi?
Nope.
From Earth.
I
Correct.
think it stars Sean Harris. I think it's British.
You chose the right planet.
Mm.
And then the second one, now fuck. Do we go one that I've never seen before, or
We haven't seen Possum, so you've already fulfilled that brief.
I'm okay with go with one that you haven't seen.
I think
before.
one I haven't seen in a while, and I think it's a bit of a Halloween classic, is Trick or Treat,
Cool.
anthology. And I'd just like to revisit that one.
Nice.
I'll add just one more because I'm going to add this as a subtext or a special text, subsequent reading, special reading, additional text for reading,
Supplementary
text.
Yep.
Um,
we're watching a breakdown right now. Anyway.
I can tell when you're doing like the.
what's the movie?
Are you broken?
Pumpkinhead,
What's going on here?
Pumpkinhead. Stan Winston's Pumpkinhead.
Lord.
Very good.
We need
I
to
was
get
tossing
George
up
to
between
bed.
that, so
Cool. Have you seen that one?
never
Nice. I saw that in the cinema like last year, I think.
really keen for that one.
Mm.
So that's it. 3 movies for the price of 2.
George needs a lie down. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been fun.
Yeah, it's been all right.
Great.
We'll chat to you next week when we've all watched or done our homework.
Well done.
Cool. See you guys.
No problem.
Bye.